Hello, everyone. So Kelly did a really good job of giving us kind of an overview of where the field is at right now. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of what you're going to need to apply, and then actually walking through a job ad, how we might read that, and then how we might make a few changes to our own documents in order to ensure that we are the most competitive candidates for these jobs we're applying to. So if you are planning on going into industry, chances are you will need a resume. There are certain instances in which there is more research focused jobs where you may need to submit your CV. Sometimes the CV will be an optional submission, and they'll say CV or resume. And if they do give you that option, you can choose whichever document best represents you. But the main difference between a CV and a resume is that a CV is presenting yourself as a scholar or a scholar practitioner, and a resume is presenting yourself as an employee. So there are a lot of the more academic aspects of a CV that are not required on the resume, because depending on the type of job, you probably will not be doing a lot of publications or anything like that, but you will need to be showing that you can do all of the hard skill engineering stuff that you have learned, and also showing, as Kelly was talking about, those transferable skills, that critical thinking, that communication, collaboration, things like that, that you would have to do in a working team every day. Um, so within those resumes, you're going to incorporate your education. That'll be any of your undergrad, and then that'll be your graduate degrees as well. You will have to incorporate your work experience. That can be both paid and unpaid for all of you. You may have research positions, you may have internships or co-ops. All of that would fall under your experience. And then you would also have a section where you can talk about any extra stuff you've done. For engineers, a lot, I see that they have a skills section where they will list some of their software skills and things like that that they couldn't necessarily talk about in their experience, but they still want to highlight. Or I will see other extracurriculars or projects if they showcase some of the skills that you've developed more efficiently, or you don't have any AI work, but you've got AI projects that you've been working on in class. I've been seeing people add that onto their resume as well because they want to highlight that skill. Um, but it is really important. You have the same experience, you have the same education, but you are going to have to change the way that you talk about things depending on what the job ad is looking for. For engineering, you have developed all of these hard skills. You probably are not going to have developed any other, you're focusing on this, and this, and this project. You're probably not going to have to tailor your resume too much. You're probably not going to have to say, oh, I learned all of these skills, but also I learned this thing that's very, very far out there and doesn't really have to do with anything. You're going to have pretty much the same things that you're talking about throughout. But depending on the company that you are applying to, the things that they care about, the focus that they have within the problems that they're solving, you are going to have to change the wording slightly and the way that you think about these ideas slightly. Um, so I work with a lot of STEM PhD students and master's students. And within that, I do work a lot with engineering students. I have them come in, they have all of their technical skills really, really down, because it's easy to know what you're doing every day and know a lot about these projects that you're focusing on. But just having a PhD in engineering is not going to be enough to get that job, right? You are going to have to show the connections you are making between the job description you are reading and the skills that you have already had. Because if the job requires you to have a PhD in engineering or a master's and above, the people applying to this job are going to be other engineers with very similar experiences. Not the same experiences, but like they have been through similar classes, they have similar amounts of internships on their resume. You're going to have to take a step beyond just what you are doing every day and make sure that you are thinking about how the things you are doing every day could serve this company you're looking at. So this is where the reading the job description, tailoring the documents to the job description will really come in handy. A lot of times I see students who, come in, they just list the things they do. Once we talk about it, once we expand this idea of like, okay, you did this, so what? Like, why? Why is this going to be beneficial to the company? Once we expand that and we incorporate a little bit of that thinking into that resume, it showcases a lot more of these students' skills. It shows that they are able to think beyond just here's what I did, but kind of how that fits into the bigger picture of what the company might care about. Their resumes improve a lot and they do become a lot more competitive. So when I work with these engineering PhD students who are trying to move into industry, here are some of the biggest trends that I see. A lot of times I see resumes that are very, very technical and do not focus on any transferable skills. Because engineering is a field in which you do need these technical skills, you do not want to be getting rid of them entirely. You do still want a technical aspect to your resume. You do want to be highlighting all those things you have done. But if you're not incorporating any of those transferable skills, those problem solving, critical thinking, communication, that is going to be a detriment to you because those are the things that show that you can work on the engineering team effectively and be able to get the project moving, get the project done, get the product out, whatever it may be. Something else that I see, particularly with late stage PhD students, is they've been spending 5-ish years focusing really deeply on one very specific question. We are at the point in research where, like, a lot of the basic questions have been answered. We're moving into more specific questions or newer questions. And just by the nature of a PhD program, you get very, very deep into your research. So a lot of times I'll have students coming in, they've been in this research for 5 years. They do not know how to talk about the research that they've been doing in a way that is understandable to someone like me who has a basic amount of knowledge, or someone like Kelly. Kelly and I are going to be the people essentially the same level who are looking at your resume, trying to get it through the process to then get into the hands of the expert who is hiring you. If the descriptions on your resume are so technical, so niche to like the very, very specific research question you're asking, the people who are reading it may not be able to know that, oh, the weird way that you described this thing, because that's the jargon that we use in our specific research lab. That is similar to this other thing, but we need to use this jargon because this is how we talk about it. Nobody but the lab is going to understand that jargon, or nobody but the specific 50, 15, 100, however many people are studying that similar or same question. There's not going to be that many of them across the country. So even if you are in engineering, even if you are working on this project and you're like, I know this, everyone in my research group knows this, everyone in my class knows this. If it's not something that everyone in mechanical engineering, say, would know, you got to step it back so that it is something that is more broadly understandable across the engineering field. People need to know not just like the answers to the very, very specific questions, but more of how your skills in engineering that you've built during that project are going to help you on a different project. Um, Another thing that I see is, again, this idea of forgetting the why, forgetting the reason why you're doing this project or this specific skill that you're building within the project. So a lot of engineers will just list down, like, I did this. They will not incorporate the skills that they're building within that. They will not think about how they are fitting into the bigger picture with this project, whether it's thinking about why the PI that they're working with is doing this research, what kind of hole it fills in science, or how it furthers the mission of the department. That's something that we're not necessarily thinking about as in a day to day with, you know, the project that we are doing. We're just walking in, we're doing the project because that's what we're supposed to be doing within this program or within this lab or what have you. But when you are moving into a sphere where they are trying to solve problems quickly, make money, be efficient about things, those are going to be the things that industries care about. And those are the things that they don't necessarily see that communicated to them if you are just talking about what you did. They need to know that you not only are skilled at doing what you're doing, but also kind of understand how you fit into that goal of the company being efficient, saving time, making money. And then the other thing that I see for engineering PhD students is that they ignore cover letters. Now, engineering, you may not have the opportunity to submit a cover letter every time. That is totally okay. But if you do see the option to submit a cover letter, you should for sure 100% submit the cover letter. I know that engineering, it is not a writing field. It is something where you are out there doing more practical hands-on things every day. So the idea of writing a cover letter may be overwhelming. We have resources that will show you how to kind of walk through what you need, but at the end of the day, it really is just talking about this overlap that you see between what you have done and what the company is looking for. So, as I kind of explained as we were walking through, the things that you should do on your resume to be competitive are highlight both your technical and your transferable skills, avoid that project specific or very, very niche jargon. Again, step it back, make sure that even if you are working on a specific robot thing, a robot project where you're trying to solve a very, very complex problem, make sure that someone else who's not working in robotics and engineering can still kind of understand the general premise of what it is that you're trying to do. You do really want to incorporate these outcomes in your bullet points. I improved something by X%, or I reduced the time that it took by 4 hours, but also thinking specifically in that about also scale, scope, the holes that you fill in the knowledge that already exists. And then again, submit that cover letter if it's an option. Cover letters are a great way to explain how you've seen the relation between what you've done and the role that is open. So here are some suggestions as we're moving into the job description itself of how you might approach creating that resume and then also tailoring that resume to these specific jobs. So I always suggest to people to keep a master resume that will look probably very similar to a CV, where you just throw on all of the job experiences that you've had, the education that you've had. Make sure that that is written down somewhere. Most of the time, you will be referring to the same experiences. You'll be talking about generally the same ideas within these bullet points, but you never know when there's something random that the company is looking for that you can be like, oh, I did a project on this back in my first year, or I did a very brief 4-month internship on AI in very, very first year of my PhD. I forgot that I did that, but look, I have that. I can talk about that in my resume. and show that I have that experience. So that can be a longer document, and then you do just pull things from that, take things off of it to then have that shorter resume that is ready for submission and focused on the things that the company is going to care about. We do recommend bullet points for all your experiences where you are talking about what you've done, the tools that you've used, and the kind of results that you have from those things that you've done. So we do recommend what's called the who method, answering the questions what you did, how you did it, and then talking about that outcome or result. And particularly for the engineering students that I've met with, again, paying special attention to that outcome because that is the place that students tend to miss. We suggest being selective about the past experiences and bullet points that you include. A resume, unlike a CV, does have a page limit. You do have to make sure that you are not throwing every single thing you've ever done on there, but putting the things that are the most relevant and best showcase both those technical and transferable skills that you have built. Reordering the bullet points can also be very beneficial for you depending on what the company cares about. It might be better to talk about one aspect of the project that you've been working on or the internship that you did before you talk about another one. Hiring managers tend to spend somewhere between 7 and 30 seconds looking at the resume. People will go in later and look at your skills more deeply if they decide that they want to bring you in for interviews and hire you eventually. But that first initial glance is very quick. It is very possible that they are only going to read the first bullet of the experiences and then just quickly glance at the other ones. So making sure that things that you've got up front are the things that are going to be the most important and relevant to that company. And then something that I think is going to be very beneficial to think about is actually changing some of these outcomes to match what the company or position care about. So sometimes being a teaching assistant in a graduate school, you, you know, do multiple things. You do grading, you maybe hold small group conversations with students. The reasoning behind that sometimes is because I need to save the professor time so they can focus on building the lesson. Sometimes it is to give students that one-on-one attention or small group attention to ensure that they are having success. Sometimes it's making sure that students have the base knowledge they need to continue to be an engineer for 5 years. Those outcomes are all related to the idea of holding these small group meetings and having that ratings that the professor can, focus on other things. But sometimes, depending on what kind of job you are applying to, they are going to care more about saving time. Sometimes they are going to care more about this idea of kind of building up a base of knowledge so that you can continue to follow through and have a very successful project or person. So thinking about not only including an outcome, but really kind of making sure the outcome makes sense for the company, for the job, for what it's telling you it cares about. So I've talked a lot about this tailoring. I want to talk now about all of this within the context of looking at a specific job ad. So when you're applying to jobs, you determine your criteria, you look at what you've done already. I have this many years of experience, I have this focus. You know what kind of job vaguely you might be looking for. You do a job search based on that. And then you also determine, like, maybe you are limited by location, maybe you care about salary. Those things will all kind of come together to determine which of the thousands of jobs you decide to apply to. We do suggest using LinkedIn. Handshake is also a place where jobs exist for students, but for PhD students specifically, LinkedIn and then some of our other resources that we'll get into later are a usually more successful place for students to find those higher level jobs. Um, Once you go ahead and do that search, you have to read the job ad to determine whether it's something you're qualified for or not. You tailor your document and then you apply. Step one, easy. Step three, we've kind of discussed that already. But step two, reading the job ad to determine compatibility. Job ads have a few different parts. We'll go ahead and talk about each of those parts more specifically, but it is really important to actually read the entire job ad through. There are certain sections that people usually focus on, but some of the sections that people usually gloss over have a lot of important information in them as well. So some of these section titles may be different from job to job, but pretty much the content is the same. You usually will have a little bit of a description about the basic logistics that you need. You will have information about the company and or department and or job specifically. They'll talk about some of the responsibilities of what you would do on a day-to-day basis. And then they will talk about the minimum and preferred requirements. So that'll be things like what education you need as a baseline, what a work experience, how many years you've had. All of that will be talked about within these requirements. So each of these sections is used for a different purpose, but they do all come together to make sure you can tailor that document, the resume that we've been looking at, to this specific job itself. Um, so I've just pulled up a job off LinkedIn. I have screenshotted different parts of it. We are essentially just scrolling down through the job ad. Um, but I did include the link. So if anybody wants to look at how this all comes together later, feel free to use that link to look at it. So the first section that we will come into is the job title and relevant logistics. This will be usually at the top, and there may be a little bit more all the way at the end that incorporates things like benefits and other aspects of like once you're in the job, this is what you're going to care about. So it will usually have a location and it will usually talk about whether it is remote or on site. It will talk about the salary, and sometimes it will talk about which department within the company it is housed in. So as we can see here, location, on-site, and the salary. Now, as you scroll down, it will get into a little bit more about the job itself. Now, this right here at the bottom is the job description. It is an overview of this position and kind of how it fits into the company. So this is the part that people skip over a lot. But it is very important to look at this because it will tell you both by the things that they actually say and by kind of the language that it uses, what the company cares about, how they see themselves, their values, their goals. So you can see here as we're looking at this civil structural engineer position, they're talking about cutting edge bridge structures that set the industry standards. There is going to be similar language from company to company in the same kind of field or area, but they will highlight different things here, and that will give you a really good insight into what they care about. There may not, in a similar civil engineer role, they may not use cutting edge or industry standards. They may use something along the lines of, efficiency, or they may focus on their impact on the community or things like that. So that gives you a little bit of insight into this company is looking for a visionary. That's, maybe not everyone is a visionary, and maybe that company culture will not be the best fit for you. So looking at this to kind of give you an idea, what do they care about? Is it aligned with what I care about? How do I express that? The next section will be responsibilities. Sometimes it will be titled responsibilities. Sometimes it will be titled what you'll do. You'll see a couple different titles there, but this is essentially the day-to-day things that you will be doing in this job. And also an overview of kind of the longer term projects. So this is a really good place to focus your bullet point tailoring. They're going to talk about you manage structural designs from concept through to like the actual project being completed. That's something that you want to make sure, okay, I've been doing a research project. I want to talk about start to finish one of the research projects I have designed, tested, completed, and the results of that. Um, you do also want to use the language that is in the job description in your resume. So a lot of times people will be talking about, say, AI. AI, artificial intelligence, the same thing. If you've got AI on your resume and they've got artificial intelligence, depending on where you submit, what applicant tracking system they're using, the programming may be programmed to look out for AI. It may only be programmed to look out for artificial intelligence. So making sure for any of that, like specific language or jargon or full words versus the abbreviation, make sure that language is matching, because even if you are talking about the same things in both places, the computer system that the resume initially goes through before it goes into the hands of HR and the hiring manager, the computer may not recognize those similarities, even if you and I as people know that artificial intelligence and AI are the same thing. So then the last main section is this minimum and or preferred requirements. So this will be things like we want someone who has X number of years experience. Sometimes they will indicate that they want specifically industry experience. Sometimes they will just say 5 years of experience. They will usually talk about what kind of education they want you to have. This is a place where they will often highlight some of those skills that they're looking for. So you can see here, they want someone who is able to, have 5 years in structural design. So that is going to be a place where you want to highlight some of those technical skills, but they are also looking for someone who is a self-starter who thrives in a dynamic environment. So they want you to talk about a time where you took initiative on a project, or you managed upwards and made sure that things were getting done. So this is another space where you should focus your bullet point tailoring, making sure that you are showing them these are the things that I bring to the table. These are the things that you've said you want that I have experience in. Um, so within that, obviously, we've talked about a lot of things today. We are not going to be able to look at everyone's resume in the next 5 minutes we have and tell you how to specifically make those changes. So we want to make sure that you are aware of the MSU resources, including these one-on-one meetings with us, so that we can get deeper into looking at your specific documents, your specific experiences, and making sure that you are able to take all of this information we've given to you and apply it specifically to yourself. So I've included here two resources that are really beneficial, and I use them with a lot of students. The first is the Office of Career Development website. We've got a whole lot of resources incorporated onto that website. We also have resources that are linked to the larger career services network. And then Beyond the Professoriate is a website that we subscribe to as MSU. Everyone who is a graduate student at MSU is able to log on with their MSU credentials. And it is very helpful in transitioning from an academic mindset to an industry preparation mindset. It's got libraries of videos with people talking about their transition. It's got workshops that about once a month talk about various aspects from tailoring your resume to I'm kind of considering academia and industry. How do I do those two job searches at the same time? And we're a 3-person office. We can only do so much, but they kind of are a great way to supplement that learning with all of their specifically PhD to industry focused resources. Within the larger career services network, It's located in the student services building. There is a career closet where you can go rent out some clothing that is free. You can have it for up to 7 days. Something else nice is in the same area, there are headshots that you can take through a headshot machine. You can take, I think they want you to only send yourself one or two each time you go in, but you can take a bunch of them and choose the one that you like best. You can just go to the career closet, rent out that whatever clothing you need, go take the headshot, come back. And that's just something that's good to know and very important in case you don't have access to any of this business or business casual clothing that you may need for future interviews for internships or full-time jobs. And then this career services network website, which has primarily it's geared towards undergrad resources, but I pull a lot of resources from this website to use specifically with PhD students because they are very helpful. So this is the Career Services Network website. This is the resources tab. And within that handshake, that is where you would make one-on-one appointments with me and Kelly. Um, you should have access to making those appointments. If you do not, then feel free to email us and we can help you get that set up. We have a resource called Interview Stream where you can do practice mock interviews. We've got what's called the Career Handbook, again, geared towards undergraduates, but I use this pretty much every time I talk about resumes. Specifically, pages 32 and 33 are very helpful for describing the who method that we talked about briefly, and some bullet point tips, including some general of these transferable skills and some verbs that might help you convey those skills. And then we also have resources specifically for international students that I always like to include. Here is the page on the career handbook that I like to refer to. So it does have some of these transferable skills within these bubbles, and then some verbs that you can use to describe or convey those skills. There are also engineering specific resources. The center in the engineering building does only serve undergraduates. We serve the graduate engineers, but there are still really great resources on the website, including VMOC, where you can upload your resume and have it check how well it would go through the applicant tracking system, that computer system that we kind of talked about. And then the Career Cafe on the first floor often has employers come in to talk with people, or other really good resources just kind of in that space around the partners that MSU has specifically for engineering employment. Here is a picture of the engineering website, and in this resume review section specifically, here is VMOC, which you are lucky to have access to. Most of the other colleges don't, and you just log in with your MSU credentials. So we are right on the edge of time here, but I do want to make sure if there are any questions that we address them quickly here before you have to move on with your day.